I'm the director of China Center here at the Hudson Institute. And again, thank you for coming to this event. We're very blessed by the centrality of the China topic in Washington, D.C., because everybody's talking about the challenge we're facing. And we frequently have good speakers with great credential and great insights, and today is no exception. And China Center, let me just say a few words. China Center is a center here affiliated with Hudson Institute. We have the advisory board, chaired by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And the board consists of a few great individuals. And Kyle, our speaker, just joined the board. And welcome, Kyle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miles.
And our one of the another important board members is here. That's Paula Dobriansky, who's ambassador, Paula. And the advisory board also consists, of course, of Scott Morrison, the former Prime Minister of Australia, as well as Morgan Ortegas, former spokesperson at the State Department, who's a former colleague of mine. Today's speaker is probably the smartest private equity manager in the country, and not only because he is a big capitalist, he's also a very responsible capitalist. He's also environmental conservative. What is it? Environmental conservation.
Yeah, that's
right.
Correct.
So it's a bridge the gap between the left and right. So both topics very good. Most importantly, his tremendous insight into the financial world and how China factored in from the financial, from the economic point of view, which is something that we really, really need. Kyle is a member of the is lifetime member of the Council of Foreign Relations, and he has taken great interest in international affairs, and he's truly the intercontinental person, not only Europe but also Asia. And so from that perspective, so we're very pleased to have him as a speaker today. And you can see his full biography from our website at hudson.org. So without further ado, and I'm going to, before I say that, so today, Kyle is going to speak on the topic that we're all very concerned about. And then will be followed by a question and answer session to be moderated by Ambassador Dobriansky. And after that, we have a reception. So the drinks are all on us. Without further ado, Kyle, please.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you. We may need a drink after this. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Miles. Thank you, Paula, and the Hudson Center for having me. It's a life's passion of mine after studying financial markets, global macro flows, and trying to understand the world works financially, how it, of course, without a doubt, interfaces geopolitically. So I'll get through what I want to say as quickly as I can. I'd love to interface with the audience as soon as I get finished. But this topic, I think, is central and vital to the national security of our nation and what we're facing today. I'm going to just let you know how this came about. We got out a whiteboard, and I know we all live in this world where we read all of the press, and the press catches things, and the press particularly doesn't catch things that Xi Jinping says in his speeches and in his written text. So we spend a lot of time developing our own view on exactly what Xi's saying, and I'm going to cover very specific things that he said, and not necessarily what our press runs with. And I think there's a big gap there, and hopefully I can help bridge that gap. So when I think about what's going on and what Xi has said, if you just look at the bottom of this slide, at the end of the 20th Party Congress in the working papers, he said, we must strengthen our sense of worry, adhere to the bottom line thinking, which means party thinking, of course, prepare for danger in times of peace, and prepare to undergo high winds and waves, and even for the stormy seas of a major test. I think that's a pretty ominous statement to be making at the end of the 20th Party Congress. Today, I'm just going to talk about this in three different buckets. If you were thinking about Xi Jinping, if he were preparing for war with Taiwan, I like to separate it into three thoughts. The first thought is the force thought, the militaristic thought. What's he doing with his military that might suggest that either building up, moving it around, what's happening? And of course, that's not my core area of expertise. I interfaced with the top levels of US military. I'm building this section, that'll go quick. The second section is, what is China doing on the mainland? What are they doing inside of China, on their mainland, in their legal system? What are they doing in building specific things? If they were about to go to war, what would they be building onshore? And then what are they doing from a policy perspective on the mainland? That's the second bucket. The third bucket is where my primary expertise is, but the middle bucket is also vitally important. And that's what would China be doing to insulate themselves from severe financial sanctions? In the event that they move on Taiwan, when Putin invaded Ukraine, we supposedly went through with some really strong sanctions. Those sanctions were like Swiss cheese. We really didn't hurt him at all. In this case, I think we will be able to execute much more crippling sanctions in the event that China invades Taiwan. And I'm going to talk about what China is doing that actually doesn't make financial sense. If you and I were running a sovereign and we were running it to, let's say, operate in the highest regard of our capital and returns on capital, we would be making specific decisions. What I'm going to show you today is China is not making those decisions. They're making decisions that are non-economic and preparing themselves for sanctions. So I'm going to walk through those three buckets. The first one is the liberation of PLA's required readiness simulations. We believe there are three simulations that have to take place before Xi Jinping and the Central Military Commission will authorize a strike on Taiwan. The first one happened in August of 22, Operation Joint Fire Strike. The second, Operation Joint Sword, just happened in April of 23. The final one that hasn't happened yet is an amphibious assault, timing TBD, and I'll get into when we as a country think that timing can happen. The first one was a 10-day exercise, of course, immediately after Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, where the Chinese launched 11 ballistic missiles to simulate the neutralization of Taiwan's air defense systems, multiple anti-submarine attacks and sea raids as part of China's furious response to the provocation of the separatist elements of external forces. That was their words, not mine. And then subsequently to that particular exercise, China's Taiwan Affairs Office released its first white paper in Taiwan in over 20 years. And there was something really important in there. They said that the new policy document did away with the past promises not to send troops or, quote, administrators to Taiwan if China successfully conquers the island. Definitely another ominous sign. The second operation was Joint Sword, which of course began the day after Tsai Ing-wen's trip to America. It happened April 8th through the 10th. And this one was a much more, let's just say, integrated exercise where there were two phases. One was an immediate deployment of forces. The second one was rapid seizure of all domains for control, air, sea, and information, to gain what one of their senior colonels said was to gain an extremely advantageous position at the outset. What we have learned, China has learned from Putin's mistakes in Ukraine is, number one, Xi knows that he can't telegraph the move like Putin did. Putin did a lot of things to telegraph when his invasion was happening. We don't believe Xi will do that. The second thing is battlefield control and domains for control are vital to China's attack if and when they attack Taiwan. And information control is key. If you look through a lot of the Communist Party rhetoric and at the schools, the Communist Party schools, the professors are all talking about the need for the cessation of data flows between Taiwan and the rest of the world. And we're going to get into that and what's going on the mainland today. But they stress this in this exercise. It stressed speed and agility, but most importantly, control of data, which resonates throughout this presentation. Just prior to Joint Sword, the PLA severed the undersea fiber optic cables between Taiwan and Matsu Island. And you know where those are up on the just northwest of Taiwan, closer to Fujian. Li Yi, professor at Beijing's Communist Party School, said this, in quotes, "We need to reunify with Taiwan as soon as possible. With our overwhelming troops and firepower, simultaneously it demands cutting off water, electricity, and mobile phones throughout the island. Electricity, water, and mobile phones can all be reconnected once they're liberated, but we must disconnect in areas the PLA is not liberated, particularly mobile phones. If you remember, China was really struggling with the protests in Hong Kong. And the reason they couldn't roll in there with the tanks and handle things the way they wanted to handle things is there was so much connectivity, there were so many phones, and the world would see the disaster that they would be, the humanitarian disaster they would be affecting on the people of Hong Kong. So when we get to amphibious assault, this will simulate an amphibious evasion. Naval experts believe there are only 3 months in the calendar that allow for this assault, and those are April, May, and August. For those of you that have studied Normandy and the Allied invasion there were very specific conditions that had to be present for that invasion to be able to happen. The tides had to be at a certain level. The currents couldn't be as strong as they are in certain periods of the year. This is even more challenging, right? This is a 110-mile gap. It has 20-foot tidal surges, and there are 3 miles of mud bogs. So this attack will have to be at very specific times. Again, we think it will be, it can only happen in April, May, or August, roughly, for them to basically bring all 3 of those simulations to life, and especially with the amphibious side. Once they give this particular, once they execute an amphibious assault, then we believe, our military believes they'll be ready to give a go order. Again, this is the force side of the bucket. Let's move straight into the mainland preparations for war and a timeline. This is vital, again, to getting out a whiteboard, putting some things on the whiteboard to understand the logical progression of what China has done to change their legal system, to change things on the mainland to prepare for war. In January of 2020, China updated its foreign investment law, which gave Beijing the power and ability to nationalize foreign assets investments under special circumstances, which include war. Their words, not mine. It's very important to know that they updated a law that gave Beijing the authority to just nationalize things and take them. We saw that happen in ARM Holdings, for those of you that followed what happened to ARM. June 2021, China issued or passed a new counter-foreign sanctions law, which enabled Beijing to seize corporate assets and detain expat employees simply if the underlying condition was compliance with foreign sanctions, i.e. if the US or Europe sanctioned China and the corporations of the US or Europe were complying with their own sanctions, China could nationalize the assets and detain the people. April 2023, Chinese lawmakers passed a wide-ranging update to their anti-espionage law, which I'm sure we all saw, banning the transfer of any information related to national security and broadening that definition of what national security information can be. And we're going to get into the raids of the various US companies since then. Just recently, in fact, last month, China passed a sweeping foreign policy law that represented a much broader extension of that counter-foreign sanctions law that created obligations and responsibilities for Chinese companies, which essentially make all Chinese companies extension of the Chinese government. It gives Beijing the legal authority to seize individuals' assets and prevent them from leaving China. The new law, coupled with the anti-espionage law, makes it virtually impossible for foreign companies to operate safely in the PRC. The last thing is they plan to roll out a new law that'll push patriotic education, I should have put that in quotes, for internet users, school children, and overseas Chinese. That was just submitted. Physical structures, power systems, and the new blood drive. March of 2023 in Fujian, China's building 18 new air raid shelters, which the province announced and showcased on its website, and 2 days later, gone. Took it off the website, never to be seen again. So Fujian was very proud of these 18 air raid shelters. For those of you that know the geography of China, that is across the strait from Taiwan. They geo-blocked it, and we can't find it anymore, but we have screen grabs of it. March 2023, they're building the world's largest combat hospital, also geo-blocked after 1 day of announced on a website. So if you're building 18 air raid shelters along the Fujian coast, you're building a combat hospital, this rhymes with what Putin was doing. If you remember, he moved entire groups, brigades of troops in October. He started building and transferring blood banks to the border December, January. He was telling you what was coming. It's happening again. and we need to pay attention. June 2023, China staged its first ever emergency drill to ensure it can handle large-scale power outages in its eastern region. Happens to be the region right across from the Taiwan Strait. It's the first time the National Energy Administration has held an emergency drill for large-scale power outages across provinces and region. It's also the largest, most extensive, most targeted joint emergency power drill. June 2023, millions of people have been banned from traveling by plane or train, and the Communist Party announced that the reason that was is their social credit scores were too low. One way that they can increase their social credit scores, go give some blood. Well, that's super interesting. Go give blood to bring that social credit score up. I think as a standalone comment, it's not as interesting, but putting it into a timeline like this, it shows you the methodical thought process of the Communist Party and what they're actually putting together. Xi's communiques to the Politburo Central Committee and the Communist Party writ large. In January of 2022, the Communist Party's journal Kishi published Xi's secret speech 60 days roughly after it was given. And for the first time, Xi himself was quoted as saying he called for the struggle against hostile forces. We all know he never names the United States in these speeches, but we are deemed to be the hostile forces. I don't think we're the strategic competitor that the press writes about. We are a hostile force. May 2022, Xi ordered the Chinese banking system to risk assess and insulate against, quote, potential severe US sanctions. Well, what would precipitate severe US sanctions? We are sending our foreign policy staff there with knee pads, begging for meetings. And our meetings are just begging for more meetings. What would change the Biden administration's tack to want us to, or force us to install or instill crippling sanctions? It would, in my view, it would only be a militaristic move on Taiwan. May 2022, Xi also ordered Chinese nationals overseas to divest their assets and repatriate foreign capital back to China. I'm going to get into why that's very important too. June of 22, in a page right out of Putin's playbook, Xi announced a trial plan outline to classify military operations against Taiwan to be classified as, quote, armed forces operations, not a war. If you remember, it was just a joint military exercise. October 2022, the 20th Party Congress, Xi said to the Communist Party in working papers, I just went over this in the beginning, prepare to undergo high winds, waves, and even for stormy seas of a major test. And also at the 20th Party Congress, on Taiwan specifically, he said, we will never promise to give up the use of force and reserve the option of taking all necessary measures. October of 2022, he also ratcheted his rhetoric regarding Taiwan by changing what he views as something that that authorizes China's use of force. He declared that a simple refusal of China's overtures to reunify would then be grounds for an invasion. Prior to this, it was someone in Taiwan's cabinet or presidency would have to formally declare they want to be independent. Now it's just, if you just refuse our overture, we can come attack. Again, the ratchet has only moved one way. We remember how Xi humiliated Hu Jintao and his loyalists, removed him from the party and installed a wartime cabinet. What the press missed in the Hu Jintao humiliation was in one day, imagine if we woke up here in America and one day you woke up and they said, Janet Yellen is gone. The central bank president, Jerome Powell, is gone. And Gary Gensler's gone. So we're going to fire the head of the SEC, the head of the Fed, all in one day. And we're going to replace them with the head of the missile unit. We're going to replace them with the head of nuclear munitions and then the head of all conventional munitions. That is removing every market technocrat that was responsible for China's supposed westernization and dealing with markets and replacing them with military people. So the press kind of missed that. I thought that was really important. All they caught was they were ripping Hu Jintao out of his seat, and it was a humiliation. Third, also Xi states that China is now laser focused, quote, on the reacquisition of the Taiwanese separatists. Again, his rhetoric is becoming more bellicose. Every speech he's given since 2017, he tells you what he's going to do, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse, in his words. In the 2 sessions, 3 speeches, the markets expected those speeches at 2 sessions to be further stimulative about restarting the Chinese economy and moving things forward. All 3 speeches, Xi told the people of China to prepare for war. The press here focused on the very first 15 minutes where Li Kang attempted to calm investment markets and attract additional Western capital. But then once he sat down, Xi Jinping took over and said, we need to prepare for war. And he said it in 3 separate speeches. All right, so we're going to get in now to the financial market movements, changes in their data policies, bond defaults, corporate raids, and wartime planning for natural resources. These are things that they're doing in the financial markets and as outshoots of those the commodity markets. So Xi watched as the Western world moved immediately to try to seize Putin's $360 billion in FX reserves. We're not sure how much the West was able to actually freeze with Putin, but we immediately went to freeze his FX reserves. What we should have done is immediately sanctioned all their banks, pulled them off the SWIFT system, and sanctioned their energy business, which we were all too much afraid to do. But that rhymes with what happened when Mussolini invaded. If you remember, UK and France got together and they had the same kind of peace through weakness ideology back then. And they said, we're going to sanction Mussolini. And Mussolini said, if you sanction my energy or my food, that's an act of war. So they said, we can't do that. So we'll sanction a few other things, but you can have all your energy and all your food to continue your campaign. That's what we did with Putin. If Xi were planning for war, you'd expect him to take what assets the sovereign has and the SOEs have in direct accounts with the US, and they would start whittling them down or trying to sanction-proof those. And we're going to get into what he's doing. US capital markets are the deepest, most liquid markets in the world and currently have the highest interest rates. So again, dollar balances should be buying short-term treasuries at 4% and 5% and not doing other things with them. So we all know China's GDP in dollar terms, these are Bloomberg and World Bank numbers, have increased 500% since 2008 alone. Our trade balance with China has basically come down to where it's about a $380 billion trade deficit annually. We have about $850 billion of trade that turns into a $380 billion trade deficit. Now, the difference between trade balance and current account balance, this for those of you that aren't particular economists or financial people, the trade balance is one data series that contributes to the calculation of the current account. The current account is all financial flows in and out. So, there are 450,000 Chinese students in US universities in the US. They are paying about $62 billion a year for that. That's money leaving, right? This is money coming into China. That was money leaving. When the Chinese were traveling prior to COVID around the world and spending, they can't spend RMB anywhere. They have to spend dollars, euros, yens, or pounds. That number was a huge number, multiple hundreds of billions. So the current account is kind of the net assessment. Think about the net income of the sovereign. So the current account, you guys are gonna think I'm maybe conspiratorial, but let me walk you through this. The current account just prior to the COVID was, as you see, trending down towards zero. That international travel number on China's macro level data series in the WIN database right before COVID was $420 billion. So think about this for a second. The current account was going to zero, and the primary reason was they had a big balance of trade that was positive in their favor, but allowing the Chinese population writ large to travel and spend abroad and maybe invest a little bit. Remember, they had certain amounts that were allowable. That number got to be $420 billion. So at a time in which the Hong Kong protests were at their zenith, December 2019, and the time at which their current account was dangerously heading below zero for the first time, COVID arose. That was really convenient for them. That really saved 2 major existential problems for the Communist Party, Hong Kong and their current account. So if you look at the current account, boom, it went straight back up to magic, $400 billion. So again, maybe it was just a pure coincidence, but maybe it was a perfectly timed execution of something else. So if you're running a positive current account, if you have more dollars coming in than going out, what you would be doing with that money is investing it in dollar-based debt at the highest yields with the deepest capital markets in the world. But what are you seeing here? China's taken their treasury balance from $1.2 trillion to $850 billion. We don't know what the new number is yet. But I would imagine that Janet Yellen's tour de appeasement recently was begging them to just stop selling their treasuries. We have to issue another $800-900 billion just for the announced fiscal deficit for the year. And the Fed's not buying them. China's not buying them. There are a few other sovereigns that are buying them. But someone's got to buy these things. I think our banking system will lose more deposits. They'll go into treasuries. But point being is, this is a non-financial move. If you were running China, you'd be buying treasuries, not selling them, unless you're trying to sanction-proof your reserves. They're getting them out here. Now, you guys, those of you that are in the economics profession probably follow Brad Setzer and a couple of people that really understand financial flows well. Brad's comment here is that they're selling treasuries, but they're buying agency securities in Belgium. If that's the case, and by the way, it's supposition. There's no data series that will show you that that's the case. But if he's right, that's also China betting that they can divide Europe and not have severe European sanctions when the U.S., if and when the U.S. sanctions them. And as we've seen out of Macron lately and what you're seeing out of Germany, there's not a lot of solidarity in Europe as far as it relates to China. But this is something really interesting. One of the other things that happened in the last few months is, how many of you in here use any of the China data series like Wind or any of these, like the Bloombergs of China? At our firm, we use Wind. At all the research universities in the US, they use Wind. It is a data aggregator of both macro level data and corporate level data. About 3-4 months ago, severed. It's gone. No more data series. You're not allowed to have it. The data that we're getting out of China now is from the mainland, approved by Xi Jinping to be released in a press release. There's no more databases. Stanford doesn't have it anymore. Harvard doesn't have it anymore. All of the universities that are actually partners with China in many ways and receive a lot of Chinese donations have been severed. It'd be different if it was just me that got severed, but it was everybody. So I think access to all data was just severed. And if you think about the strategy on the battlefield about controlling the data domain, we all know that China has 20% plus youth unemployment. We all know their economy is really struggling right now. The last thing Xi Jinping wants is the Western press to keep writing about how much trouble their economy's in. So you know what? They just cut the data feed. Now we're going to run with whatever they say. And case in point, last year they were welding their citizens into their buildings during the extreme COVID lockdowns. The LNG demand for China was down 22%, and WeChat payments were down 30%. If I gave you those 3 data points on a chalkboard, would you say GDP was up or down? Right? It was a train wreck last year, and you see that in the commodities markets. But China reported a very positive GDP for the year. So it's interesting what they do. So now we're not going to get those data series anymore. If you were Xi Jinping and you have 2 worlds. You have your domestic world, which is your RMB or yuan-based world, which you control. They control everything internally. But then you have the world, they're interfaced with the outside, and this is key to understanding. All cross-border settlements, about 85% of all cross-border settlements when China trades with the rest of the world are in dollars. Everything they do internally is in RMB or yuan. The dollar is really important to them. And so if you were Xi and you thought about the way their Chinese capital markets work, you have domestic capital markets that issue bonds and stocks in RMB, then you have domestic or Chinese companies that issue bonds in dollars. So case in point, there are about $170 billion worth of dollar bonds that the Chinese property developers issued to the West. So a bunch of Western investors bought dollar bonds. They have RMB-based bonds too. But if you were China and you were about to prepare for war, you would just say, you know what, I'm just not going to pay those dollars back. I'm going to default on my dollar stuff, and I'm going to pay my RMB stuff so that my people are okay. And that's the basic way to think about what they're doing here. So their offshore defaults, their dollar-based bonds, if you look at the 2 current categories, are 35%. So 65% of the dollar-based bonds of all the property developers in China are in default, offshore. Onshore, it's a little bit different. Right now, there are 79% of those bonds of the same companies not in default. Only 21% are in default. So if you're a Westerner holding a dollar bond, you're going to get something that rhymes with hero. SOE banks, this is another thing that just started happening. So the way that airplane leasing works in China is the big SOE banks are the orderers for Boeing and Airbus. They're the biggest orderers in Asia. They own the order books. Those order books have grown since China ascended the WTO. They want to control the aircraft leasing markets. They want to do it for their own market domestically, and then they want to be the big lessor for the rest of Southeast Asia, which they are. They have never missed a year to grow their order books in the last 20 years. Well, just 2 months ago, some NDAs went out to the marketplace. Two of the big SOE banks want to sell their entire order book. They've gone from building with a very specific strategy in mind as controlling the order books of all the big airliners in China to, we want to sell it all. And we want dollars and we want the highest bidder. It's just a change in their strategic positioning in the financial markets. They would never do that if they thought they wanted to keep growing and having a positive relationship with financial markets in the West. These things are in the market. These are $10 billion plus transactions. So the other thing that happened even before they put together their new laws about national security of data is the Chinese authorities arbitrarily and capriciously raided the Minsk Group, Bain, Capvision. They detained multiple employees. They are doing things that are scaring the lights out of US corporate due diligence companies. All three of these companies just due diligence. They look at Chinese competition. If you're a private equity firm in the US, you hire one of these firms and say, hey, this group of Chinese investors or entrepreneurs came to us to get us to give them money and raise for the new company. We need to understand if they're criminals. We need to understand what their history is. You know, you do basic due diligence. The Chinese raided all three of these firms, took all of the computers, and detained employees. If you are trying to develop or continue a system that attracts dollars and attracts corporate interests, this is something you would never do. Okay, wartime planning for natural resources. If we were running China is the world's largest importer of crude oil and LNG. They import almost 12 million barrels a day of crude, 8 BCF a day of LNG. They use about 15.5 million barrels of oil a day. So you would try to secure that kind of natural resource commitment from, let's just say, countries around the world that might not adhere to US sanctions. And if you were going to do that, what would you do? Well, maybe you'd get on an airplane. And for the first time in the history of the world, a Chinese premier landed in Saudi Arabia. And maybe you'd try to get the Sunnis and the Shias to love each other and start talking with Iran and Iraq. What do you think he just did? He just did that. He's trying to put together 12 million barrels a day. On the gas, he'd be trying to do the same thing. Gas is harder, so I'm going to walk you through. Here's where China gets its crude from. About half from the Middle East, 13% Africa, about 16% from Russia. So really, they only have to worry about a handful of percent. You know, the Russians are going to go along with them. You know, the Saudis play both sides. You know, the rest of the Middle East will play both sides. So they're pretty safe, I think, in their let's say, countering sanctions moment in the event of an invasion. What they're going to have to worry about is the majority of this is seaborne, and we have a great Navy. So those Straits of Malacca are going to become trouble for them on the energy side. But let's just say in securing commitments, they're there. On the natural gas side, LNG, the brown area there is mostly the stands, and that's pipeline. So you got to focus on the rest of the world. The really only problem for them on the LNG side is Australia. So if you knew you couldn't get Australia, which they won't get Australia to agree, what would you do? Would you build a lot more coal because you have a lot of coal? Back here. In May of 2023, China's coal imports hit 360 to 380 million tons. That compares with 290 million tons the year before and an all-time record in 2013 of 327 million tons. This is John Kerry's worst nightmare, right? They are going back to the dirtiest, cheapest potential fuel in the event that they're not going to be able to get that LNG. Again, I'm giving you one idea here, but it sure looks to me that they are trying to secure all of their energy commitments. Chinese local governments permitted a staggering 106 gigawatts of new coal in 2022. That's 100 large coal-fired power plants, the most since 2015, and it quadrupled over 2021. Just think about where the world's headed on an ESG front and on a climate front and Greta. I can't figure out why Greta never ends up in Beijing, but we can talk about that later. Other coal power project activity accelerated as well, 50% more starts. China, the combined capacity of coal power plants that started construction, that just began last year, was 6 times as large as all the rest of the world combined, just to put things into perspective. So what else would they be doing to diversify themselves away from sanctions? Gold. They added 8 tons of gold in April. They've got about $150 billion worth of gold. It doesn't really move the needle per se, but on $3 trillion of reserves, $150 billion is nothing to sneeze at if they're going to really need access to something they can sell somewhere that doesn't adhere to US sanctions. The last thing, there are 2 things, I'm almost finished here. We're going to have plenty of time for questions. China has 20% of the world's population, and they're hoarding almost 70% of the world's grain today. Now, different grains are in different amounts, but the head of grain reserves at the National Food and Strategic Reserves Administration just told reporters this last November, our wheat stockpiles can sustain China for 1.5 years. That's super interesting. Why would you need to do that? Why would you need to have a wheat stockpile that lasts 1.5 years in China? The China Enterprise Grain Reserve Company was formed in August of 22 to manage their national grain reserves. The new company is a joint venture between their 2 state-owned grain companies, Sinograin and COFCO. If you had a grain reserve, you're running a country, and your people in one of your largest cities are hanging out their windows, banging pots and pans because they're welded into their buildings, and you have a food reserve in that city, wouldn't you release the food reserve to the people that needed food? It didn't happen. The grain reserves weren't touched in Shanghai when the extreme COVID lockdowns were going on. If you're not going to release them then why are you holding them? I don't know, maybe you're holding them for something even larger. That's an even larger problem. Again, I'm trying to show you in a series of different ways that they're doing things that don't actually make sense unless there's a greater plan for a worse situation. The last one here, this is a fascinating stat. The number of Chinese ICBM launchers reported by the Pentagon went from 100 missile silos and launchers in 2020 to 450 by October of last year. Just think about that for a second. They had 100 in their entire country in 2020. They have taken that number and increased it by 350% in 18 months. Now, why would they do that? Again, this has a strategic militaristic buildup, food buildup. They're trying to sanction-proof their money, and Xi's telling you in every speech he's given to prepare for war. In fact, he just recently did it the day that Janet Yellen landed in China. That day, he visited China's Eastern Military Command, and he told the people in the Eastern Military Command who oversee Taiwan to prepare for war. He was gaslighting Yellen right before she landed. So if you listen to Xi and you read what he says and forget about the Western press, like I've tried to do here, he's telling you where he's going, he's telling you what he's doing, and he's making every preparation that I would make if I were running China and I knew I was going to invade Taiwan. So I think it's important to have this conversation. Do I know that he's going to do it? I don't. But I actually take him at his word. I think it's likely. I think it's highly likely that he invades Taiwan. And I'm not a military strategist or analyst, I'm a financial analyst. But looking at all of the writing on what I call the Great Wall, it sure looks like it's headed all in one direction. So I'll stop there and love to take questions. And Paula, I think you're going to come up and join me. Thank you.
Paula, just came back from Taiwan.
Yes, thank you. I was indeed going to say that because this is our game plan. First, outstanding presentation, very compelling, well-researched, really the kind of detail and the argumentation, as I said, is very compelling. and we have to have a vibrant discussion. So I'm only going to ask you one question. So all of you, please be thinking about your questions, because we're going to really go to you and hear your exchange with Kyle. My core question is this. I did just, as Dr. Yu just mentioned, I just returned from Taiwan. And needless to say, front and center, at least during my visit and the delegation I was on, we did focus on this very question. What's the timeline here? I don't think anyone is focusing on if, but they are focusing on when. And this is what I want to push you a bit further. The elections in Taiwan, the 3 candidates, will be held in January 2024. Some are arguing that this election, the Chinese, of course, are already wielding and waging their influence on, or hoping to wield their influence on the results of the election. Some will argue, well, that's the quote-unquote invasion, that they have the political. Some argue this. We'll get the right candidate. It's low cost. We got it. We don't have to expend our military or our economic reserves. On the other hand, then, to a different point of view, it was said, well, let's look at 2027. Xi Jinping, that's a point where he goes on to another term and looking at really the legacy. And maybe it should be that point in time. Give us now your view, since you made such an extremely compelling case. What do you think in terms of the timing? And let me add one more wrinkle in the mix. The question was, is it going to be military? You even yourself, in articulating and mentioning the Operation Joint Strike, the amphibious assault, in this case, the other question is, well, could it just take the form of a blockade? Dive a little deeper on that, and then we're going to go to all of you.
So I'll start by saying, I recently returned from, and so did Miles, from the beaches of Normandy. And when you walk around and you understand the destruction and the disaster that one madman, or let's say back then 2, Hitler and Mussolini, could bring to an entire world, it really sunk in, understanding that we know Putin's a madman. We also know he's not acting. Paula, when I hear people rationalize when someone might move for this reason or that, or there's an election coming, or it's much easier and it'd be much easier on the economy to do X, Y, or Z, when you really think about who these guys are, they are not rational. And they are not economic actors. Mind you, Putin didn't invade because he thought it was a great economic move. And he didn't choose a time that was suitable to the rest of the world. It was a time suitable to him. And so when I think about whether or not Xi Jinping is rational and economic, and if you remember when the blood banks moved to the border, the New York Times were saying he's just saber rattling. I mean, for God's sake, everyone thinks these people are rational and they're not.
So you think this could be imminent in the sense that there's a mobilization. I mean, it could be around the corner.
Yeah.
It could certainly be in 2024.
Yeah, so the sum total of my analysis, especially on the financial side, which is where I find myself to have the most expertise, it's now down to a period of months in which they're ready and not years. The cadence of what they're doing in financial markets can take us down to 12 to 18 months. So I would say my guess is before the end of next year. And again, who am I to guess? But based on my analysis, it sure looks obvious that that's the case. And then, if I were Xi Jinping, if you read very carefully the militaristic doctrine that is in open source, they are focused on targeting, destruction, way before detection happens. So I think he'll move much sooner than any of us think he'll move. And I think it will be military. And I hope I'm wrong about all this, because the world will be so much better place for us and our kids and our families and our relationships. If I'm right, that's awful. And it's something I don't want.
Well, I have to say, again, your analysis here is very compelling. It's well articulated and well researched. And so, all right, let's go to questions. And by the way, we're going to try to get everybody in the mix here. Let's go to you first, and please introduce yourself.
I'm Peter Humphrey. I'm an intelligence analyst and a former diplomat. I'm troubled by a real fantasy that seems to dominate this problem, and that is that Taiwan has the wherewithal to stop an invasion fleet. And clearly it does not. If we're looking at convoys coming from Poland, they ain't coming. Everything that Taiwan needs has to be on the island on day one. And it needs more stuff than Ukraine ever needed. And we ain't supplying it. So I want to ask why we're living with this fantasy that we cannot conceivably arm Taiwan in time. And failing that, does Taiwan have the financial wherewithal to make the anti-ship missiles, the drones, and the torpedoes that might have a chance at sinking the invasion fleet?
Thank you for your two questions,
Yeah,
and
great.
thank you also, no speeches. Get to
It was a- it
so
was
we
a
can
great
hear his
question. So
answer, please.
One thing I didn't really elucidate well there is, I am a huge proponent of crippling China through the economic sphere. There are 4 wars that we can be fighting with them. One, the kinetic war that we're all referring to today, where the U.S. has the best War Department in the world. The second one is a cyber war department, cyber war, where we have the best department in the world. The 2 other wars, the economic war and the data/propaganda war, we don't have war departments, okay? What I'm advocating for is, if 86% of cross-border settlement for all of China's daily transactions are in dollars, we can hobble their economy if we press one button. If we take them off the SWIFT system writ large and say, your SOE banks, your joint stock banks, if you invade Taiwan, that's what we're going to do. Their economy comes to a grinding halt in 1 month. And we need to socialize the concept of that button. Here's the problem. You look at the administration, and again, I am not being partisan, it's just the people in place today, and even the people that were in place in the Trump administration, because we talked about this. The Treasury's owned by Wall Street, right? Mnuchin was owned by Wall Street, Yellen is owned by Wall Street. They want one thing. They want more dollars, more euros, more shekels. They want to chase economic deals. And so getting Treasury and OFAC to socialize the concept of pressing this economic nuclear button, they won't talk about it. It's too incendiary, but it is incredibly effective. We don't need all the Harpoon missiles sitting around Taiwan. If we don't want to engage militarily, I believe some of it will be military, but if we really want to be effective, we press that button. Put me in charge of OFAC. I can work the button, right? And I know what kind of devastation it will do to China. And so we as a country, it's an amazing effective deterrent. We need to start talking about it.
By the way, if I could just add, it's Russia-based. Do you know what Medvedev, when he was president of Russia, he said, you take us off SWIFT, you cut us on SWIFT, it's a declaration of war. Yeah. So it is a severe measure. Let's go to this gentleman here, if we get a mic over here, and if you'll introduce yourself. And please, no speeches, just questions.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm Daniel. I'm the co-founder of Freeware Investment. So basically, my job is to basically just conduct due diligence investigation on S&P companies to assess their exposure to China. Mm-hmm. We are looking about, like last time I come to Hudson Institute was like UC Kwan, their legislative yuan came here, their chairman came here. We're talking about elections, so thank you for bringing it up. So, but the thing is, like, my worry is that, like, is how do we de-risk from China of all those Wall Street and S&P companies, considering their significant exposure from China. We're talking about more than 15% of almost like every S&P companies being exposed to China. And my job is to basically just to build up a portfolio that's free from authoritarian countries to offer to investors. And one of the things that, like, I think right now, American investors, we have trust of ESG, environment, but we don't have a trust on human rights. If we're saying that I want a portfolio that's free from China, free from authoritarian countries, I want human rights. Sorry, you don't have a choice. So my job is facing some difficulties right now to promote that awareness. Is there something that we can do here in the private sector? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I've been pushing for behind the scenes and in the public domain for a long time. And unfortunately, again, even if you think about Biden and especially Blinken on the campaign trail, he specifically said many times in the public domain that we, meaning the United States, will never trade human rights for a trade deal with China. But what did we just do? We just went over there, hat in hand, begging for meetings in the various disciplines, and we didn't mention human rights. We don't care. We care about economics, and it's Wall Street driving this movement. So, I always say in our firm, if our national security and our values were left up to Wall Street and the private sector, we'll all be speaking Chinese tomorrow, right? We need leadership at the top, and we need leadership to set the guardrails. And it's interesting. The Director of National Intelligence in the United States every year declassifies a bunch of work, and he writes a report to Congress. It happens every March, and it's the DNI Threat Assessment Report to Congress. How many of you in here have read that report before? Okay, 5%? That report details the largest threats to U.S. national security. And every year, it's China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, in that order. And it's really interesting. It's well written. And there's this chasm between Wall Street and S&P and the Director of National Intelligence giving you the data saying they are the largest threat to our way of life, to our values, and to our system, and to the security of our country. And yet we can't wait to raise more money for an IPO that will help them genetically modify their food so that they can have a bigger reserve to attack us with. It's actually insane. So there's no answer other than if and when this happens, the people that lose the money, that lose what they have invested in China, whether it's PP&E on the corporate level or whether it's money invested from U.S. institutions in their equity markets and their private equity world, they're going to lose it all, in my opinion. That day is coming. And those people deserve to lose it all, and they deserve to lose their jobs. Those people have never lost their jobs, right? They're going to say, but everybody did it. And I'm going to tell you that that's not going to fly. So I think there's no way to prevent it, although corporate America is doing all they can now to diversify supply chains. And they're not going to tell you about it beforehand. They're going to do it very quietly, and they are doing it.
I'm going to catch Dr. Yu. Did you have, you said you have a question or comment?
I will give up my right to
All right.
any member of the audience.
All right, thank you, because there are quite a few. I'm going to go to you right there, and then we'll pass it to you next. And I'll come back. I saw over on this side and back there. We'll get you all. Please, if you introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you for speaking. My name is Zoe, and I'm an intern at the Vandenberg Coalition this summer. I just wanted to go back to what you said in your comments at the start of this discussion, where you said that you don't think that Xi is necessarily a rational actor. I'm wondering how you reconcile that with kind of the methodical approach you think he's taking in terms of the grain reserves, selling bonds and all the things you mentioned in your PowerPoint. Why would he go that far and then act in some kind of irrational way, not taking into account other factors like elections and such in his actual invasion of Taiwan?
Okay, and if you'll pass the mic to him, and you'll hold your question.
So I think that they've had this plan for a very long time. I think, Xi has been in 10 years. He's consolidated power like any dictator would. He's removed all of his opposition, with Hu Jintao being the final straw. Everyone in the standing committee owes their life to Xi Jinping in some way or fashion. So he's got yes men all the way through, and he's finally got to this point where he has total power. Now, he's still very worried about, he sacks generals like it's the national pastime over there when they even look the wrong way. So he's worried internally about any kind of conflict, something that Miles and I talk about. But he's been very rational in the build to take Taiwan. But what I'm saying is rational thought from our perspective. Our perspective is, well, if he was rational, he would never do that. He would never move on Taiwan. If he wants the GDP of China to move and he wants them to continue to grow and internationalize and make the world a larger kumbaya place, he would never do this, right? So what I'm saying is from our perspective, he's not going to act rationally. From his perspective, what's rational is he's going to take Taiwan, and it doesn't matter what anyone else in the world says. They believe they're strong enough now to withstand U.S. sanctions. They're going to build a coalition of the axis of evil. If you just see who Xi's been visiting, you've got him visiting Saudi, you've got him visiting Venezuela. He told, he has a limitless partnership with the world's #1 war criminal. How does our Treasury Secretary go over there and ask for more meetings? There's a big gap between kind of, I think, perception and reality. I wake up every day thinking I'm taking crazy pills. So I think he's rational in his own mind, but he's not rational as we think.
Kyle, we like your directness on everything here. All right, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Kai, and I'm also an intern at the
You're
Vandenberg.
Kyle also?
Oh, I'm Kai.
Oh, Kai,
Kai.
sorry. Okay.
Very close.
Okay.
But I'm also an intern at the Vandenberg Coalition. My question is regarding Southeast Asia. So a lot of Chinese soft power and economic power is in Southeast Asia. And as someone whose family in Singapore grew up in Singapore for 20 years, that's very concerning to me. Do you think that the US has any sway in Southeast Asia if China were to do anything to Taiwan in terms of holding China economically accountable, as you said in your speech?
Yeah,
And if we could get the mic over to the gentleman right here with the yellow tie. Thank you, sir. Excuse me.
your point is well taken. Taiwan isn't the prize. Taiwan is a stepping stone to Southeast Asia and also to Oceania. You know, we fought some really big battles in World War II in the Marshall Islands, right, and the Solomons. And so when you think about Southeast Asia and then Oceania writ large, China has been methodically changing the organizational structure of Oceania, bribing them, I mean, I'm sure you saw they just announced they're putting an embassy in the Solomon Islands yesterday. We are fighting as much as we can, but again, they don't operate in the rules-based order. They bribe, coerce, they influence, they do things that we can't do. Now, we can help build things and enter economic partnerships, but we can't pay off leadership like they do. So they have really set an influence campaign in Oceania, and in Southeast Asia, we have our allies, right? Singapore, I don't know, Singapore might split down the middle, sorry. But when you think about the Philippines and you think about Japan, some of our greatest allies over there care very much about this. I'll tell you, one of our senior military leaders who I'm close to, maybe the senior most one over there, went and met with the Japanese defense minister. And the Japanese defense minister said something really interesting. He said, this is the largest existential crisis Japan has ever faced. And we said respectfully, you know, ever? I mean, this is up there, right? And he said, no, ever. And so to me, that told me Japan knows how vital this potential conflict is to them. And we, of course, have very strong militaristic ties to Japan, and we have Article 5 protections with them. So the long way of saying this is Taiwan is a stepping stone to Southeast Asia. And if we allow this to happen, then the countries of Southeast Asia will have to arm and fight or submit to China's rule. And this is China's plan, and for those of you that have read Unrestricted Warfare, right? They have to secure the first island chain by a certain date, and then the second island chain, and then they move on. They actually have a plan, and they've had this plan for a long time. And so we have to stop it.
Sir, we're going to you, and then we have two questions here and back there. Yes.
Eric Rosenman from the Jewish Policy Center. We have seen repeatedly in the press that American analysts have quoted Xi telling his military to be ready to take Taiwan by 2027. You're saying 12 to 18 months, perhaps, and your expertise is fiscal. You said not necessarily military, but you're in touch with military experts. Are we in a position, if it comes sooner rather than later, and even 4 years is maybe not that much of a warning or preparation time, is it your sense that the U.S. military can do anything other than suffer perhaps a very serious defeat if pushed earlier?
Yeah, let me disavow you of that thought. We have a plan. We have a very strong plan. We know we can win. We just need to go. And it's going to be ugly. If we have to execute that way with our allies and strategic partners in the region, there are going to be tens of thousands of lives lost. No one wants that to happen. But please don't believe in this sense of fatalism that we're so far behind that we don't know what to do. You know, China has, you think about this, I think in 2010, China had 35 ships in their Navy. And now they've got 350 ships in their Navy, and they're building a Navy. They have 11 shipyards running 24/7. We have 2 that have like union problems. So, you know, our country's gone somewhere where we need to fix a few things. But in their Navy being that large as far as a ship count's concerned, they have 2 aircraft carriers. One was a junker from the Ukraine that a Chinese businessman bought to turn it into a casino, and in the end it was an MSS guy wanting to flip it into a aircraft carrier. That's the Liaoning. They built one. They're building another one. Both of their aircraft carriers run on diesel. We have 11 carrier strike groups that all run on nuclear. We're still ahead on the naval side and advanced weaponry side, and they haven't fought a war. We, at least have some people that can really move this needle forward. You probably saw the U.S. just took Admiral Sam Paparo, who's commander of the Pacific Fleet, nominated him to be the chief of the Navy. His Senate confirmation hearing should be in the next couple of weeks. We have people in the right places. We have the right people in the right places. We have the right equipment. This isn't something that we want, and we never want to execute this, but I can tell you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, we have a plan, and our plan is a devastating plan to China.
You have a next question, please.
Hi, my name is Kevin from Georgetown University. So in examining all instruments of national power, whether it's military, diplomatic, or economic, has American diplomacy failed us so that we have to resort to using potentially military power? And to that extent, how should we integrate all these instruments to effectively deter China?
Yeah. So this question about American foreign policy or diplomacy, we have obviously adopted we've energized the appeasement caucus. Name a time in which appeasement against autocratic despots has ever worked. It never works, right? What you learn is deterrence through strength is the only path forward. So the current path of our country is embarrassing to me. And by the way, I need to tell you, from a political perspective, I don't sit on either side. I am pro-choice. I own 200 guns, and I'm the biggest gun control advocate there is out there. I don't fit in a box. But
I think you're a Texan.
Yeah, I'm a Texan. But again, a Texan who is #1 in gun control. Okay, so I don't fit with our governor either. The point I'm trying to make is it's a nonpartisan thing to say that our foreign policy is going so far in the wrong direction that I actually lose sleep about it at night. It drives me berserk to see the weakness that we're pushing and this begging and pleading when what we need to do is show strength and be strong. We're the strongest country in the world, and we should start acting that way. And so if it goes to war, it's not a failure per se of foreign policy, although we're going in the wrong direction. I don't believe we could have stopped Hitler. If you read Hitler's own notes and you read all of the notes of Churchill, I don't know if you've read Churchill's books and Hitler's notes, Hitler was going to invade. There was nothing that was going to dissuade him. Now, if we attacked him when he moved on the Rhineland, that war would have been much smaller. But that's such a tough decision to make amongst a bunch of pacifists and appeasers. You can't attack early. And God, I can't imagine us being the first mover. We would never do that now, given the way the world is set. So I'm resigned to believe that if and when it happens, Xi is going to do this. He's told you since 2017, in every single public speech he's given, that he's going to do this. So I'm believing that that's going to happen. And what we've got to do is have everything ready for if and when that happens. Back to your question, we are the economic powerhouse of the world, and Europe is, in theory, our ally. There are a few that might go the other way. But if we just act in unison, we can shut them down. They have a closed capital account. We can stop this, or we can hobble them, and then we'll have a new regime and they can start over. So I think the foreign policy failure question is something where I'm very disappointed where we are, but let's hope we can change that quickly. But I actually don't think foreign policy can fix this.
All right, you have a question at the back, and then we have one up front, and then we're going to move to Dr. Yu. Okay, but at the back, please.
Hi, thanks for a great speech. This is Kathy Xue with Voice of America. After the withdrawal of INF Treaty, the U.S. Is still lagging behind in developing these intermediate range missiles, ranging between 3,000 to 5,500, while China has already fielded over 1,200 ballistic and cruise missiles. What does this missile gap mean to the U.S. in the potential conflict over Taiwan? And what is your recommendation to offset China's missile advantage in the Pacific? Recently, there are some policymakers propose this ring of fire missile strategy. They want the US, the Philippines or Japan to hold some shorter range missiles and deploy the long range to Australia, Pacific or Guam. But do you think it's feasible or necessary to build this network of conventional missile, ground-based missile encircling China, or should the US invest more on nuclear weapons or drones, some other weapon systems? Thanks.
Again, not my strong point, although I have my opinions. I think that when you look at our submarine fleet and our Navy, I don't think we need any more missiles. We have plenty. And we have the best submarine fleet in the world, and we are at least a generation, if not two, ahead of China on the submarine fleet. So I don't think that's encircling China with our missiles is necessarily even a good idea on the land-based. But I do think that we have all the firepower we need at the moment, and I don't think basic missile counts matter. And if you read what the Pentagon says, you know, while China might have more missile silos than we do, we don't know if they're active missiles in there. They're still building. But the point being is, if you think back to what Churchill was saying in World War II, from the late 1920s on, he's saying, hey, are you guys looking over? Well, look at what he's building. He's building the biggest Air Force. He's committed to building the Navy. He's committed to building more airplanes and more munitions than anyone else. Is anyone paying attention? And we all said, oh, there's not going to be another war. Let's just let Neville Chamberlain and Lord Halifax work this out. The point being is China has been hell-bent, really in the last 5 years, going exponential on everything military. And we're just starting to wake up to this fact. And it bothers me too. But again, it's all par for the course if you think he's really going to do what he's going to do. I think, unfortunately, I believe that's likely to happen.
So we have your question. We'll hear from Dr. Yu. And with his permission, I'm going to ask one last wrap-up. Oh, we just saw you in the back. Okay, we'll take yours in right there, and we're going to close with that. Yes.
Hi, I'm Kathy, and I'm now intern Project 2049, and I'm from Taiwan. And I used to work in Legislative Yuan for 2 years. I agree with what you say because we've put too much focus on Western, de-risk China, but China is also de-risk for the world. So my question is how Taiwan and the world can prepare for China that is de-risking from the world, and how this say-do gap, and like we're awareness about like China is going to de-risk the world, but how can we overcome this say-do gap in this democratic countries, especially U.S. and the Western countries? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let's take that mic all the way to the gentleman in the back if he raises his hand. And no, keep yours. Keep yours. We have two, please.
So again, it goes back to the kind of dogmatic operations of the people sitting in the office today. That we all want peace. I think everyone in this room wants peace. But if you know that war is coming, you better start changing your method of operation. And unfortunately, we continue to go down the appeasement pacifist route more and more instead of turning the other way. And I really think we should have turned the other way a long time ago, because I know from talking with our senior military leadership, they know this is coming. And our intelligence agencies know this is coming and think it's a high probability event. They don't think it's a super low probability event. So why isn't our leadership in our country acting differently? And they're just in a position where we've had too much peace for too long, and they really, really, really want peace, and they really want to project their moral values, and I get it. I understand that. But unfortunately, that's not where the world is today, and I think that's where the gap is, right? Leadership has to change quickly.
But I would say, from having just been there, I think people are really mobilizing, and they're aware of what is at stake here. Dr. Yu, we're going to go take him, and then come to you, and then me. Please.
Hey, Kyle. Tom Lyons with 2430 Group.
You got to speak up.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Tom
it's hard to
Lyons,
hear.
2430 Group. Question for you. What do you make of the new appointment to the PBOC over the weekend? And then what advice do you have for multinationals that have operations based there?
Yeah. First of all, glad to meet you in person. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your service to our country. Anyway, I think that, okay, so a lot of people didn't follow this. Back to the 20th Party Congress, where they fired the head of their central bank, the head of their treasury, and the head of their Securities and Exchange Commission all in one day, in one fell swoop. Imagine if we did that. I can imagine what world markets would do. So Yi Gang, they took out of the PBOC, and just a few weeks later, quietly reinstalled him. No, we were just kidding. I mean, the rest of the world hated the fact that he got ripped out of the PBOC. On the Saturday of 4th of July weekend, about a week ago, they quietly fired him again. So they fired him, rehired him, fired him, and it's in a period of time when the yuan, both onshore and offshore, was massively devaluing, did 5% in a week. And that was really worrying China. So they were in the middle of a currency crisis, and they fired their central banker. That's not the crisis operation you should engage in at that moment in time. So I think it was a move of panic. I think it was a move of, it was a sophomoric move in capital markets. But you have to remember, the Chinese have only been at this capital markets game for 20 plus years. We've been at it for over 100 years. So I think they are still really green, really new at capital markets. The problem is the size of their market in nominal terms is so much larger than their GDP. And so they've got like 20 plates spinning all the time. And if one plate drops, the others are shortly behind. So I think it's a big deal that Yi Gang kind of did the on again, off again, off again moves. And it's fascinating to me to see, truthfully, I was with my son in the Bahamas spearfishing. I had a friend ask me 5 days later, and I follow this stuff as closely as I can, especially the financial side. I missed it. I'll be the first one to admit I missed it. And that was intentional by China. Saturday on 4th of July weekend, that's a perfect day to tell us, to just remove him and put someone else in and pretend nothing ever happened. It was fascinating.
Miles, let's get yours, then mine. We're going to wrap then, and you'll get to be one-on-one with our guest speaker.
Actually, Paula, thank you very much. And I think due to the constraint of time, I'm going to yield my time to you for
You are? Okay, well, thank you. All right, well, thank you. You're very gracious. I have the mic right here. My wrap-up question for you is, and I can't help myself because I do follow Ukraine very closely, and something you said reminded me, lessons learned. We're in the midst of what's happening right now with Ukraine, and it said over and over, what happens in Ukraine, and if there's a successful outcome, that will send a signal to Xi Jinping. Okay, potentially, potentially not. But something you said earlier, very fast, Putin in 2007 at the Munich Security Conference, he actually openly said, Western values are not our values. We have every right to go and invade in any country where you have Russian speakers and ethnic Russians. And then we saw 2008, Georgia, well, Chechnya before that, 2008, Georgia, 2014, Ukraine, and then just last year. What is the core lesson learned and that the core message you want to impart to this audience here?
You actually just stated it for me. It was perfect. And you and I met over Ukraine at the Bush Center.
That's right.
And I think exactly, you just put it together perfectly. I think that Putin told you where he was going and what he was going to do. Now, he didn't tell you he was going to blow up his own apartment building to start Chechnya, but he did go take Georgia very quickly. He took Crimea and Sevastopol next in 2014. Here's also a fun fact, if you just think about this. I've been on the boards of some of the largest financial institutions in America as far as endowments are concerned. And so when you think about institutional asset allocation and investing in various markets, institutions had fairly large sums of money invested in Russia. I helped craft an institutional compliance program or sanctions compliance program in 2017. And I stood up on the stage and I was beating drums saying, why do we have money in Russia? I'm trying to understand. He took Georgia in 2008, he took Crimea and Sevastopol in 2014, and why do we have $350 million invested in Russia? They said, well, because it's cheap, super cheap. They gave me a 60-page PowerPoint, which I still have. And I said, I think it's insane. We're insane to have money in Russia. Half of these companies we're investing in Russia, the Russian government owns more than half the company. Like, cheap, it's cheap for a reason. They can just take it away. And he's not a good guy, and it's a terrible place for our money. And by the way, so is China. It's an awful place for our money, and here's why. And I was saying that in 2017, and I was overruled. And the day that Putin invaded, 350 million lit on fire. And these institutions can sweep small amounts of money under the table. If you have $100 billion, what's 350 million bucks? It actually doesn't even make the news, by the way. It just goes away. And your constituents probably don't even know it. But in China, you can't sweep 5 billion under the rug if you've got 100 billion. You're going to have to talk about it. And so I think that the lesson learned is Putin's invasion of Ukraine was really important all across the board, from the force perspective, from the diplomatic perspective, from understanding the psyche of madmen, and then the financial markets. And financial markets, think about back to World War II. After World War I, it was the US and Britain lending Hitler the money to build his force back up to come at us with. We lent him the billions of dollars to build his force back. We are building China's entire PLA, Navy, Army, and with US money, we've got $3 trillion worth of PP&E and FDI invested in China. I think it's insane that we keep investing their money. And I know many of us have worked together to try to keep the thrift savings plan of the US military from investing in Chinese companies. I mean, you can't even make that up. One day there's going to be a book written about this.
Miles, you and the China Center here at Hudson, thank you for inviting Kyle Bass. If I may, to please join us in thanking what an outstanding presentation. We were delighted you were here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to thank our moderator, Paula. Thank you very much. And speaking of the book, I think the next book that Pascal you should write should be called The Financial Interpretation of China's Logic of Aggression. Right. So thank you very much. And with all this grim assessment and very convincing, I'm going to present you with a token of appreciation, which is a symbol of honey, peace, and harmony, which is Winnie the Pooh.
I love it. Thank you, Miles. Thank you. I love it. This will be on my table every morning.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.